Consciousness actually is on the edge between the quantum and classical worlds. If you think that consciousness causes things are completely different. And I think consciousness actually is on the edge between the quantum and classical worlds. If you think that consciousness causes collapse, that would be going from the quantum to the classical. Or if quantum is collapsing, the collapse is happening on its own to give you classical, and the same thing.
What if the universe doesn't exist without you? Not as a poetic idea, but as a scientific fact. In 2025, cutting-edge experiments suggest that reality itself, every star, every atom might depend on someone watching it. This isn't a sci-fi plot, it's quantum physics, and it's about to change how you see everything. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will flip your understanding of existence upside down. Welcome to a journey that challenges the very foundation of what you believe about the world. For centuries, we've assumed reality is solid, fixed, and independent of us. The chair you're sitting on, the sky outside, it's all just there, right? But what if that's not true? What if the act of observing shapes the universe itself? This idea, rooted in quantum mechanics and supported by decades of experiments, suggests that consciousness isn't just a passenger in reality, it's the driver. Let's dive into the science, the experiments, and the mind-bending implications of a universe that needs you to exist. At the heart of this idea is something called the observer effect, a cornerstone of quantum mechanics. In the early 20th century, scientists discovered that particles like electrons or photons don't behave predictably until they're measured. Take the double-slit experiment, a classic in physics. When scientists fire electrons through two slits, they act like waves, creating an interference pattern on a screen. But when they place a detector to watch which slit the electron passes through, the pattern changes. The electrons behave like particles, as if they know they're being observed. This isn't a one-off quirk, it's been replicated thousands of times since the 1920s. What does this mean? Until an observation is made, particles exist in a state of superposition, a cloud of possibilities. They don't have a definite position, speed, or path. The act of measuring forces them to choose a state. It's as if reality waits for a conscious observer to make it real. This raises a wild question: if particles need observation to take shape, does the entire universe depend on consciousness? Let's make this concrete. Imagine you're looking at a mountain. You assume it's there whether you're staring at it or not. But quantum mechanics suggests that, at the smallest level, the particles making up that mountain, its atoms, electrons, and photons, don't have fixed properties until observed. Without an observer, they exist as probabilities, not certainties. This doesn't mean the mountain vanishes when you blink, but it implies that its reality is tied to the act of perception. This idea isn't just theoretical. In 2019, physicists at MIT conducted a version of the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment, showing that the behavior of photons can be influenced by observations made after the photons have already passed through a system. In other words, the act of observing in the present can retroactively shape the past. This suggests that time itself might be less rigid than we think, and consciousness plays a role in stitching reality together.
Between the two. So in quantum superposition, a particle can exist as a wave of multiple possibility in the background or in the foreground as a particle in definite states or locations.
So, why does this point to consciousness? Because observation isn't just a mechanical process. A camera or sensor can record data, but it's the interpretation of that data by a mind that collapses the quantum wave function. Nobel laureate Eugene Wigner argued in the 1960s that consciousness is essential to this process. Without a mind to register the outcome, the universe remains in a state of ambiguity. This idea, called the von Neumann-Wigner interpretation, suggests that consciousness isn't a byproduct of matter, it's fundamental to reality itself. Let's bring this closer to home. Think about your daily life. You wake up, see your room, and assume it's been there all night. But what if the certainty of your room, the shapes, colors, and textures, only emerges when you perceive it? Light, as physicists know, is just electromagnetic waves. It has no color or brightness until it interacts with your eyes and brain. The objects in your room are collections of particles, each in a probabilistic state until observed. Your consciousness doesn't create the room, but it may be what gives it definition. This flips the materialist view, the idea that matter comes first, and consciousness is just a happy accident. Instead, it suggests that consciousness is the canvas on which reality is painted. Philosophers like George Berkeley touched on this centuries ago, arguing that to be is to be perceived. Modern physics seems to be catching up, showing that the universe might be less out there and more in here. But if consciousness shapes reality, what happens when the body dies? Does awareness end, or does it shift to something beyond our physical world? In Part 2, we'll explore near-death experiences, quantum immortality, and the possibility that death isn't the end, just a change in perspective. Stick around, because this is where things get truly wild.